and to take us through what's been happening today and across the board. We're joined now in the studio by Arise Politics editor and director of news, Sumner Sambo. Great to see you, Sumner. Lots of upsets, close calls, I mean, intrigues in this ballot. The APC coming out on top, the PDP taking up the rear. What is your assessment of it all, broadly speaking?
From the figures we had when I was coming in, the APC already had 13 governors, the PDP 5, and the NMPP 1. Now, of course, the other political parties are still watching and being hopeful. Maybe they'll be able to have any. But if you take a look at what's happening, we are seeing about 11 state governors, incumbents, who are seeking re-election. Out of 11, 8 have been re-elected. Have been returned re-elected for the second term, while the other 3 are still battling, and of course we're still expecting results. And with everything that's going, it looks like the likelihood of returning back to office is very, very high, based on what we are seeing. And then, unfortunately, we are seeing the signs that the women are trying their best to actually present the first female governor, but it's proving difficult. We are still waiting for our next result in Rivers State, where we have the Labour Party's candidate being a woman, and then, of course, in Adamawa, the APC's candidate being a woman. It's been a mixed grill. We've all been waiting with bated breath, hoping that, we'll have Nigeria's first elected female governor, but that hasn't happened yet. We've had,
positive,
that would have been a positive one for women, but we're still hoping. For some of the intrigues that are ongoing, I mean, you start from Bauchi State, for example, where we've seen Bala Mohammed, coming back very strongly. I mean, despite all the team up by the godfathers of the state, I mean, former speaker, who Yakubu Dogara, and then Bello Kirfi, who used to be a former minister too. They all teamed up, I mean, among others, and backed the APC's candidate, despite being members of the PDP. But unfortunately, the APC's candidate, who happens to be Nigeria's former chief of staff, couldn't scale through, and the governor got returned. And then you go to other states where we are seeing, a sort of the governors pulling their strength, and then, of course, the APC trying to also muzzle other political parties. And then, of course, since the outcome of the presidential election, we've seen what looks like a lot of people trying to take advantage of the political system. Inec is on the hot seat right now because some of the processes have just gone out of what seems like Inec's control. I mean, we are seeing electoral officers, collation officers disappearing, and you just find out what exactly the problem is. How can it be that a collation officer will just take away 2 or 3 local government results and then just disappear into thin air? So lots of questions being asked as to the credibility of the process. And then when you come down to some of the results that we are having, some people are winning and women overwhelmingly. You see the distance between the winner and then the loser, the gap is just too much. And then, of course, there are some of the things that we are seeing too. Let's not forget, it's not just the governorship elections. There are state house of assembly elections.
I was going to come to that.
We're seeing young people emerging. We're seeing some speakers who have been there for some, even 24 years, being shown the way out by younger people. And then it looks like it's a mixed group. But look, INEC needs to answer more questions. And then, of course, the ruling party too. I mean, lots of accusations here and there, just like the way it's also accusing other political parties. So it's left to the courts to decide now, because with everything we are seeing now, there seems to be a tectonic movement that's ongoing, and it looks like the courts will be the final arbiter and not the voters that will decide the eventual winners.
Nigerians vote first and then the courts votes after.
Yeah,
that's what we're beginning
court
to see.
order democracy.
The
That's
court simply, puts the gavel down.
I know, Sumner Sambo, we do not expect all politicians to be like former President Yar'Adua, who was honest enough to say the process that brought me into office was fraudulent, But how much of a burden of legitimacy do these incoming governors or re-elected governors have to deal with? Do you think that Nigerian politicians are conscionable enough to say, the process that brought me in was not legitimate enough. Are we likely to see any of those?
Well, we don't have the likes of Yaradua in this sort of political dispensation that we have now. Because I can tell you that most of these people...
Well, that's a good question, though. That's an important question.
Yeah, I mean, the issue of legitimacy is there. Look, Charles, a lot of people who will be coming out as winners in this election would have to be walking with their heads bowed low.
Absolutely.
I mean, because the turnout, look at it, there's a lot of voter apathy. So it's going to be like 1/4 of a state voting. I mean, look at Eboyin, for example, 199,000 people coming out to vote. I mean, in other states, that's a senatorial district. So there's just something that's going wrong there. And so when you see even the presidential election, the greatest challenge that Bola Ahmed Tinubu is going to be facing as president-elect and then as president of Nigeria, if he's eventually sworn in, is the issue of legitimacy. And then when you don't, unite people, there's a tendency that you will just be governing people. There will be no willingness for people to want to surrender themselves to the government. But I can tell you that there are some signs of hopes too.
Right.
Because we have...
Well, on that note, a sign of hope, I hate to interrupt you, but we've got to break in here and cross live to the collation center in Kaduna State, where the collation of results has resumed. Let's listen in.
Okay, that's live visuals from Kaduna State. We definitely have our eyes on that one. But Sumner Sambo, politics editor for Rise News, is still here with us. Sumner, before going to Kaduna, you were talking about hopes, legitimacy, but you said there are signs of hopes. Where?
Yeah, I mean, with the election, for example, of the Catholic priest in Benue State, Reverend Father Jacinta earlier, who actually won, despite even his own Catholic community, the church kicking him out. He has gone ahead to go and win this election now, and he is going to be the second Catholic priest to actually become governor in Benue State. There was the late Father Moses Adasu, who was the governor of Benue State in the aborted Third Republic, between 1992 and 1993, before the military came into power on November 17, 1993, when Abacha took over. And of course, all the governors then had to just go away. And so this is, it looks like, the clerics are beginning to get into it, because there's also another one too who contested in this same electoral cycle in Abia State, Bishop, I think Sunday Onoha, Sunday Onoha, who is the ADC governorship candidate in Abia State, but unfortunately, it looks like there's still lots of trouble in that particular governorship contest, so we don't know how it's going to turn out at the moment. But it's some sign of hope that, look, in the midst of all of these complaints here and there, that there are some people who believe that they can stand the chance of contesting and winning, and if people are able to come close to them and fight through the political process, despite it being called a dirty game, that something good can come out of it. And some other young people, like in Kwara State, a young journalist, I think about 26 or so, coming out to win the election. And then in Yobe State, a young chap who came out to unseat a speaker who has been there for about 24 years. So when you look at these things, you see that, look, this election is not totally bad as people are saying. And then you go to some other downsides of the election. You see what happened in Lagos. Charles, this word, with the way we have seen these political movements going on, the winning in Lagos could have taken place with devoid of all those violence and all those challenges that we had.
The gap seemed considerable.
Yes, it's more than that of the presidential election. So why did, the other parties, why did they need all the violence that we saw and all of that? And then when you see what's going on in Rivers State, despite the fact that one party is leading and leading with a very wide margin, there's been lots of complaints, and yet the results are yet to be declared. What's going on over there? And then you look at some other states in the north too. In Kebbi State, the elections have been declared inconclusive. What exactly is the problem? And then, of course, in Sokoto State, the APC has taken back that state. I mean, APC has won back 2 states that it had in 2015. That's Benue and Sokoto. Now, in 2015, Samuel Otom was the APC candidate who won and unseated the PDP there. And then in 2015, the outgoing governor, Aminu Waziri Tambuwal, was the APC candidate in Sokoto State before both Otom and Tambuwal decided to move to the PDP. Now, the APC seems to have gone back there to grab those seats back to itself. But when you look at some other states like Niger, it's just been a smooth sail. And then you look at, a few states here and there like Borno, that we're hearing, Zulum. It's just a smooth sail for some other people.
Plateau State.
Plateau, yes. PDP has grabbed, Plateau State. It was in the hands of the APC. It's always been a PDP state over the years, but of course, with the politics that came with Buhari's emergence in 2015, heightened expectations here and there. But of course, that's how it keeps going. But what the painful aspect of it is that the electoral body is now being subjected to a lot of, microscopic search. Look, Inec needs to justify what exactly is going on. But look, let me tell you this one, Charles, the problem we are seeing is as a result of politicians interfering with the process.
That's
and it starts with the National Assembly. The National Assembly and the presidency must be called to question this time around. You know why? Because Inec national chairman is not responsible for appointing the National Electoral Commissioners and the resident electoral commissioners. So what usually happens? What happens is that the resident electoral commissioners owe their loyalty to the politicians, that's the presidency that nominates them and the governing party that nominates them. And so INEC national chairman cannot call a resident electoral commissioner and give him a query or remove him from the position or anything. So it's lame duck. The same thing with the national electoral commissioners, the national commissioners. So when people are blaming Professor Mahmoud Yakubu on all that's going on, they should understand the appointing authority. Who is the appointing authority that appoints the resident electoral commissioners and the national commissioners of INEC? They should know that the appointing authority and the political party that the appointing authority comes from has greater influence over the electoral process. So a REC could decide to tamper because they actually bring the people who are the collation officers. And so the same thing goes down. The REC is more powerful than the national than the chairman of INEC at the state. And the INEC chairman, if he calls the REC and wants to say one thing or the other, in the electoral process, is deemed as an interference. So if you were the INEC national chairman, what would you be doing? So some of them disobey all of this and they don't do anything.
I'm glad you brought this point up because it's important for our audience to know about it. But we're looking at pictures right now on the screen, split screen, of Kaduna, where the collation and the announcement of results is due to start imminently. But we've still got Sumner with us. And Sumner, you were talking earlier, very interesting, about the rise of the Reverend Fathers who are sort of coming in. And I thought it was very interesting because most of them, the ones who get into politics, belong to something they call liberation theology, where they say that thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And it's their job to do that will on earth. And they get into politics and so on to actualize it. So very interesting. But I was going to...
Sorry, just interject there. That was the driving force in Philippines politics.
Oh, yeah. It's also a lot of Latin America.
Yeah, Latin America. A lot of these priests come in to ensure that, look, they have their own heaven on earth. Before
in fact, many of them carried arms.
Liberation theology.
I was going to ask you about who gained ground and who lost in this election in terms of the number of governors they had before and after the ballot. I think you sort of peripherally answered it earlier, but if you could be a little more sort of clear on that in terms of the number of governorships that have been won or retained and the ones that have been lost and taken by other parties.
Okay, so we actually have in 28 states where governorships position are up for grabs by any of the political parties. Out of that, the APC, the governing party in Nigeria, at the national level, is currently having 13 seats at the moment, and with some of the latest announcements we've seen before I came on air, it could actually get to like about 14 or 15. And then the People's Democratic Party, which is the main opposition, already has about 5 at the moment. There are hopes that they may actually have more in the states like Rivers, and then of course you have states like Adamawa and all of that. And then of course you have the NMPP. The NMPP has snatched one seat from the APC in Kano.
That's a big prize.
Yes, and then of course we had always seen this coming, because if you look at the 2019 polls, there were 2 states that actually were meant to have been lost from the APC. That is Sokoto and Kano. The margin of difference between the winner of the Sokoto election, that is Aminu Tambuwal in 2019, was very, very slim. I think 312 or so. And so there was that talk here and there that the election was lost, but actually somehow he has some support somewhere else, and then he emerged winner. And then, of course, Kano election too. There was that talk that Abdullahi Ganduje, the governor of Kano, had lost that election, but somehow they got support from Abuja and all of that. And so those 2 states had always been on the radar that they were going to go away from the APC. That's Sokoto and, of course, Kano. And that's what has happened now. We've seen the NMPP. Now, in 2019, the NMPP candidate now was the PDP governorship candidate then. So he moved from PDP to NMPP. Don't forget himself and his principal, Rabi Musa Kwankwan. So they were all in the PDP then, and then they've moved to the NMPP. And then, of course, they've tried to show that when it comes to Kano politics, they are fully in charge, because even the senatorial seats, they had 2, and they gave the incumbent governor 1. And coincidentally, the outgoing governor and the former governor, Rabi Musa Kwankwan, so they've always been political friends. They grew up together, did lots of things together, and one was governor, the other one was deputy governor to him. And when the other was going, that's Kwankwanso was going, he handed over to his deputy governor. So the deputy governor then, who became the governor, Abdullahi Ganduje, had wanted to replicate the same thing, to hand over to his own deputy governor. But unfortunately, that has not happened.
Sumner, I mean, winners are emerging, offsets have been recorded, but I don't see a lot of the Labour Party in all of this. What happened? Would you say that that whole phenomenon, the wave of Peter Obi, has fizzled out? What exactly happened to the Labour Party in this election? When it came to local elections, they're nowhere to be found.
The challenge with Labour Party is that, number one, they were too hasty in trying to form an alliance, and they built an alliance on an individual rather than a political machinery. So you see, if you want to do this, what they had intended to do was like what Bola Ahmed Tinubu started doing in 2003, when he was the only governor that survived the onslaught by Olusegun Obasanjo. And Obasanjo tricked the Alliance for Democracy governors, AD governors then, and then unfortunately he said that the AD should not bring out a presidential candidate so that they will support him, because he's a Yoruba man and other parts of the country were likely to kick against him. And so, but he was, guaranteeing them that if they don't bring out a presidential candidate and they support him, once he emerges, he will give them a soft landing so that all of them will retain their seats back. But unfortunately, it was a political trick. And once he won his re-election, Olusegun Obasanjo, unfortunately, he engineered the downfall of all the other governors. And that's why you saw the likes of Oshoba, Baba Konde, all of them, they lost out. It was only Bola Ahmed Tinubu that survived that. Now, he had to start rebuilding his own political machinery. But when he did that, he didn't focus it on himself. He focused it on his party, which was the Action Congress. Now, he used the AD to conclude his term between 2003 to 2007, but he built a new political structure called the Action Congress, which now metamorphosed into the Action Congress of Nigeria, ACN. And then eventually, from himself, he went on to have the likes of Oshomole, and other governors, and until you could see that that party began to grow up. And then in 2013, they formed an alliance, and then in 2015, you could see what happened. So the failure of the Labour Party was that it built an institution on an individual. It coalesced itself around an individual rather than an institution. And so when that individual did not become successful in the election, it lowered the guards. But I can tell you that there is still hope, because if you look at Enugu, you look at Abia, they are the political parties that, you know, should have won those seats according to what the figures that we are seeing. Because look at what happened in Obingwa, for example, in the Governor Ekpeazu's local government.
Yeah.
Very briefly, you could see that the governor's, you know, political machinery almost swallowed up Inec's officials and all of that, saying that they should not go on because the Labour Party's chances were becoming heightened. Now, if they are able to come together and see how they can win just one state or two, in addition to some of the senators that they have, and build an institution ahead of 2027, the Labour Party may stand a better chance in future elections. But building it around one individual is the problem. Because don't forget, Obama had advised when he came to Ghana the other time that Africans should stop building strong men and build strong institutions.
That's a very good point. And on that note, Sumner, thank you very much indeed. Sumner Sambo is Arise Politics editor and director of News.